But actually, we're not going to talk about how to do it. We're actually going to tell you how we did it. So we're moving away from actually a lot of theory that's being discussed today in all these different sessions. And we're going to move into a bit of more of the practical side of how to do these things. But I think to start off with, I think it's important just to a little bit of context about Zam magazine for those here who are not familiar with Zam magazine. Zam magazine is an independent media platform. We have our offices here in Amsterdam, but we're bringing the work of journalists, investigative journalists, writers, thinkers, academics, artists, photographers, filmmakers from the whole of the African continent. We bring it to the Netherlands and to a wider audience in Europe. And this is, we feel, is very important work because Zam challenges a lot of the stereotypical viewpoints and perspectives that we have of the African continent. We believe very firmly that by changing the perspective, changing the narrative, we can change the system. And our key aim is to really build a new future relationship between Africa and Europe based on equality that benefits everyone. It's a big aim. We're not under any pretensions that
we're not there yet.
Achieve it. But we're doing a huge amount of work in that particular area. Zam works in a couple of themes. We work in investigative journalism, we work in arts and culture, we work in politics and opinion, and we tackle the issues that are very relevant to all of us. So we tackle identity, we look at climate justice, we look at migration, we look at erosion of democratic values, bad governance, all important, just as important for our African audiences as for our European audiences. So one of the key areas that we're really working in is what we call futuring. And the major project that we've been working on in this particular area, which we're going to talk you through today, is of course Glitching the Future. Heidi is our project lead, our creative lead on that particular project at Zam. And no better person to tell more about what Heidi does than Heidi yourself.
Thank you, Sean. I'm just going to give some conceptual background before we actually go into what we produced, which I think is, they always say in practice, show, don't tell. Mm-hmm. But I think before we show you, we'd like to just give you some of the conceptual seeds that brought us to the work that came out of this. I also just want to say that as much as I'm an artist and scholar and writer, I come from this background of not only fine art, but also writing and editorial practice. And Bubblegum Club, who collaborated with us on Glitching the Future, is what sort of trained me to see not only how we're perceived as young Black African people, but also gave me this network that was able to build this beautiful project with Zam. So I'm just going to go through, hopefully quite quickly, some of the ideas that sort of spawned the conceptual direction. Okay. Firstly, the future is not a blank slate. It is a contested terrain, and we find ourselves caught in the crossfire. Mainstream philosophy has long framed time as linear, placing Europe as the pinnacle of progress. In Observations on the Feeling of the Beautiful and Sublime, written in 1764, Immanuel Kant declared, Among the Negroes is to be found none who has accomplished anything in art or science. So fundamental is the difference between these two races of man. In lectures on philosophy of history written in 1830, George Hegel added, "At this point we leave Africa. It has no movement or development to exhibit." So these are some of the things as young African people, as young Black people, that we grow up being fed about who we are and about how we should see ourselves not only in our subjectivity, but along the timeline of human development. But of course, there have been lots of scholars that have challenged this. I want to quote Dipesh Chakrabarti, who wrote Provincializing Europe, Post-Colonial Thought and Historical Difference, that the Global South has been relegated to a racialized waiting room of history, where modernity is framed as a future achievement rather than a lived reality. So this is what Glitching the Future sort of presents. The idea that time is not something that is written firstly from outside of ourselves, that there's a history that we're meant to be taught and to be fed about ourselves, but that time is constantly unfolding and that we are part of that unfolding, that we will not be told where we sit in history, and we will also be taking part in the building of a future. Of course, in terms of practice, lots and lots of Black people have been attempting to do this. And I look to Afrofuturism as one of the frameworks that has explored these thoughts. Although the term was coined by Mark Derry in Black to the Future, Afrofuturism has been shaped by practitioners like Sun Ra, who have blended cosmic myth and futurism into Black culture. But of course, I'm much more interested as a Zulu person, not only in what African Americans have done to place themselves in this narrative of time and futurity, but also what African people are doing. So I want to define a difference between Afrofuturism and African futurism, which of course I'm not inventing. People have made that distinction before. And I want to talk to African time as something that, of course, is looked at often in a negative way, right? We're always late. We don't understand punctuality. We don't understand timeousness. But look at it more as a way of thinking about how Black people deal with time when they decenter whiteness. John Beatty's African Religions and Philosophy says that ancestors actively shape the present. And Nnedi Okorafor, who's the person who actually coined the term African futurism, defines sci-fi subgenres as a distance from the diasporic desire to be included in time and futurity. I also, before I move on to how we actually glitch time, I also want to really intentionally mention the relationship between time and technology, right? And how technology itself is defined in a sense that centers whiteness, right? If we think just very broadly of what technology means, of course, we'll think of like Silicon Valley. We'll think of the tech bros, right? We'll think of mostly white men who define what technology does and how we engage with it. Okay, but I also want to look at how people like Capitan Mavunga, a Zimbabwean scholar who works at MIT, he wrote in What Do Science, Technology, and Innovation Mean in Africa? That we should advocate by starting on viewing Africa not only as a passive recipient of technology, but recognize it as a site of inventive, philosophically rich knowledge production. This is what really inspired me to start thinking of the practices that exist in my own culture. For example, if I think of Izangoma, Sangomas, I think of practices like Pasha. I think of Ukubula, which many people might know as throwing bones, um, which are practices of divination, right? There are practices of actually not predicting, but speaking the future into existence, right? And they don't just live in this sort of metaphysical space, they also live within the tools that people collect, right? You can think of fetishes, you can think of altars. These are technologies that live in everyday life, even in the most rural cultures, right? And even if you think of, for example, many of you have, if you've been to South Africa, many of you might have driven from the airport past an informal settlement, right? And you can see satellites dishes around on top of these informal settlements. And think about it. If you can't afford to actually live in a westernized house, then that priority to get a satellite dish installed, that tells you a lot about how Black people are dealing with technology. And even where I work, the Durban University of Technology, translated into Zulu, University yobuchwepheshe, the direct translation of technology, has a lot to do with slyness, with stealing, with living outside of the margins, right? So this is how Black people have approached technology and futurism after having been excluded, not only from historical narratives, but being threatened with the exclusion from future narratives as well. South Africa has a long history of hacking. Historically, of course, white suburban users of technologies would have been people who hacked, right? But nowadays, Black people are hacking too. Think about the Nigerian prince, right? Think about the African scammer. These are cultures that are not only emerging, but ingrained in how Black people live, right? So this project has a lot to do with refusing not only to center white dominant narratives of what technology and what time and the future and the past mean, but also not only highlighting but generating new ways of how Black people are already practicing, right? Are already writing themselves into these narratives. I think I'll leave it at that point. We do maybe want to present our manifesto,
absolutely.
right?
So, yeah. It's the next slide, actually, please. Yeah, so very clearly a deep well of knowledge that Heidi's just alluded to and give us some insights to, that's just not being used in the technology that each person has in their pocket in this room. We wanted to change that. We've created, how did we do it? So we've done it in very many different ways. And one of the ways we've done it is this particular pack of, it's actually, so it's not to be kept, it's to be handed around as a increase. Okay, we'll hand them around separately. They can be handed around separately, but it is, we've published this as a kind of a zine, actually, but we also created a manifesto in a video form, which I think we should start with that.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at that.
Technology is not neutral. Its codes are written by power. Its systems mirror the extractive logics of empire, prioritizing profit over people, speed over sustainability, surveillance over sovereignty. Glitching the future is a counter method, a praxis for reprogramming digital futures through a decolonial lens. It rejects the myth of universal design. Instead, it centers multiplicity, repair, and the right to imagine otherwise. Our tools are speculative, embodied and insurgent. We work in glitch and delay, in refusal and rewrite. We draw on feminist networks, community protocols, and the poetics of code. We ask, what if infrastructure was designed for care? What if networks honored consent and complexity? What if data flowed along ethical, non-extractive lines? Glitching the future doesn't promise answers. It offers methods, experiments, disobedient architectures of possibility. This is not about inclusion in existing systems. It's about rebuilding them from below, with logical knowledge, collective memory, and technological sovereignty as foundations. We are not here to optimize. We are here to reconfigure, to glitch the signal, to reclaim the code. This is a manifesto. This is a method. This is the future we demand.
So, rebuilding.
Next slide, please.
Rebuilding technology from the ground up, Heidi. What? I mean, when we first started talking about this, it's such a huge idea. It can be very, very daunting. And what we found as we began to work on this is it wasn't daunting at all. It was inspiring. It gave us so much energy to want to get this project created. And how do we go about it? I remember we looked at this particular statement from Minnie Salami. And the highlighted text here, it will take a wet and fluid place where thought leads to discussion, where discussion leads to awareness, to quench the flames that are burning on the continent. And so we took this as our departure point of how to bring this project to life. This slide we included in our presentation pack to a main funding body. The funding body was, in the Dutch, it's called Stimuleringsfonds for the Creative Industry. So it's a creative industries fund in the Netherlands. They're there to stimulate and to build new design thinking, research in architecture, and also in immersive experiences and collaborative media forms. And that's what the fund is there for. This we added to the slide pack, and I remember that we were thinking, okay, is the fund going to buy this? I mean, this is just such a crazy idea. And we're asking for the top amount of money. We're asking for a big chunk to actually put this thing together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fluid place.
It is.
That's where we started.
Yeah. Yeah. I think on the zines, you guys will see a QR code. So I'd encourage you to actually go onto our platform, and you'll see that even the way that we constructed the website was really quite fluid. It's not really like one page means this. Like, we actually have various amounts of collaborators, and this inspired me to actually think about this idea of witness and its direct relationship to technology. Like, in this one text, Hydro Techno Epistems, like, I feature artists like Tabitha Rezaire, who's very interested in how witness on the continent relates to technology. And she talks about things like, for example, internet fiber cables are underwater, right? Whilst we're encouraged to, like, for example, if you wet your phone, it's going to die, right? You don't want water and technology to mix, but actually water and technology are really mixed. And she looks into, like, African cultures, like water deities and things like that, So witness is like a central idea in what we're talking about, and a kind of prompt to maybe glitch this idea of technology anyways. Right?
Yeah, and I think what was very important is not to be afraid of big ideas. I think being, massive ideas that you can't sort of get in your mind, people tend to get really frightened of them and steer away from them. And I think that, in our discussions, I remember it was really important to say, look, we really have to think without boundaries here. Otherwise, we're just not going to get to the fertile ground.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, that it's really key to be able to, what we wanted to do is to break boundaries.
Absolutely. And also explain or sort of display how people are already breaking boundaries. Like if you look at the screen, the following slide, please. This is an artist called Aluta Noel, really brilliant designer, and we asked them to sort of use the local aesthetics to think through what their idea of technology was. And she used quantums, which are those taxis that you see in South Africa. They're called quantums. And so she was thinking about like quantum technology and quantum thinking, to sort of bring those ideas together. She was also thinking about load shedding. We have a huge load shedding problem in South Africa, and this results in like copper theft and, people actually doing illegal things to supply themselves with electricity. So we found a really visual way of illustrating some of the ways that rules are broken in order to create new realities or to survive in the realities that exist.
And how important is it to be able to see the glitch not as a mistake, but actually as a spark of intuition or a spark of energy or a creative impulse? How we were really busy with that kind of idea as
absolutely.
well.
It's not just important, I think, I, as a person who was born into rural KwaZulu-Natal, and I was literally, I had to fight and steal into the system that allows you to survive, right? It's almost, there's no other way, right? I'd also like us to move into the next video to sort of illustrate not only the importance of breaking those rules and glitching, but also what it can produce. I'll talk about it a bit after
A couple of slides down.
Right. Yeah. Should we just jump to it?
Want to do the video?
Yes, please.
Right? Self-explanatory. I don't even have to. I just want to say that a student of mine from Wits University called Siyasanga Ngwengweza. The idea is pretty self-explanatory, but just to answer your question, new work is produced by breaking or recognizing how the system is broken and then trying to engage in that brokenness and producing
and forcing those breaks, bringing them to the foreground.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, actually. This piece of work, it really hits home. There's just no getting around it.
Absolutely.
The tech that we're involved in is completely exclusionary. It's not including us all.
Yeah. And just to bring that conversation into this room, obviously talking about the future or trying to glitch the future is a speculative practice. But it is also a form of advocacy, really, to say that we're in Zuid-Afrikahuis, yes, but I'm South African. I don't see myself really in this archive. And I know because I was born by people, I'm engaged, as I said, with people who work with history and the future on a daily basis. So I know that Black historicity exists and has existed. And with lots of people that have presented today and the quotes that I chose to open with, we know that that absence is intentional. And we are saying that there are Black people who see that, who are very aware that they have been and are being erased. And they're making their own histories and their own futures. And whether Zuid-Afrikahuis is going to be part of that or not is up to Zuid-Afrikahuis.
So, a bit of a challenge there, folks. Yeah.
Can we go to
Let's move to our next slide, which is the collaborative slide. So I think it's slide number 5.
Yeah.
30 odd collaboratives.
More than 30 at this point.
In this particular project, as of now, we started the project in 2025. We're moving into its second year. Let's talk about the collaborators as of now. All to be found on glitchingthefuture.org. That's where all of this knowledge resides at the moment. A lot of the QR codes on the zine pages that we passed away bring you directly to fascinating videos with the collaborators that we've worked with. You selected 3 for specific reasons, I'm sure.
Not really, because I think everybody's contributions were, equally valid and just phenomenal. But I think because of the varied nature of their collaborations, maybe it might be important. Natalie Paneng is an artist who's really interested in making up worlds, which I think that's why it's important when you're thinking of the future to actually have a visual manifestation of that made up reality. Tulile Kamedze is an academic who's so brilliant at looking at not just the infrastructure of our apartheid history, but also sort of imagining how to deconstruct those. So they're really interested in like the classroom, for example, how we can teach differently, how we can sort of break down that hierarchy between the teacher and the student. Pussy Party is a duo that obviously DJs, but their parties are a lot more about, I heard a lot of people talking about food and sharing. So the way they even sustain party culture in Joburg has a lot to do with different ways of sort of thinking about how we even party.
Yeah, and just picking up on one of the breakout sessions which talked about spaces and creating spaces and how Pussy Party have created very safe spaces within the Joburg scene, which are very inclusion based, and that being very important.
Can we go to the Fagugesi slide, second to last, please? So they did a presentation at the Fagugesi Festival where they talked through South African music culture as tech, and they really lingered on Kwaito, for example. But I just want to plug myself, forget about Pussy Party, that I will be talking at Groningen on the 29th, and I'll be sort of picking up where Pussy Party leaves off, where they focused a lot on Kwaito and house and how we've used that as a form of tech. But I sort of thought about, hey, Black sonic traditions are so vital to how Black people think, even academically. And so I'll be tracing firstly, the drum. I love that I was hearing a lot about the drum earlier on, but I was thinking of that whole lineage from the continent to the transatlantic journey, how the drum carries into jazz and then hip hop and then into Kwaito, but then I'm thinking now about Amapiano and Gom. Gom itself means drum, and it's sort of swept the world, right? And it's a way that you can think about how Black people have taken technological systems. I mean, Gom and Amapiano are built from stolen software, right? People could not really afford to go into studios and make music, but yet they have changed the world. The sound of the world sounds different because of what Black people have produced, So come to Groningen at the end of the month. I think that we have pretty much said what we wanted to say, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's also, I just wanted to add that all the collaborators are not all based in South Africa.
Right.
So ZAM and Bubblegum Club set up collaboration. We got the funding together to create a project. Some of the collaborators are based in the UK, some are based in Switzerland, some, and obviously quite a large amount in South Africa. I think that's very important to say that this really does feel like a Pan-African movement. It's important to look at it in that way. Where are we now? 2026. I mean, we'll be in 2 weeks' time in Groningen. What have you been doing with your students at DUT?
Yeah. No, I've been obviously trying to wrangle them into this project. And if you guys know anything about Zulu people, they are really stubborn. They're really like, there's a lot of dissonance, a lot of dissatisfaction. A lot of these kids are under-serviced. A lot of them come from schools where, they're not getting the best. And a lot of them will have been part of MK or EFF. So there's a lot of anger and a lot of recognition about how they've been excluded. And it's interesting that one of the biggest departments at DUT is the engineering department. So children really, I say children, but these are young adults. They really understand how technology is being used against them. But there still is really a big gap between the tools they're being provided and how they can actually use them to challenge what's going on. And so it's been interesting for me to try and get them to think otherwise about how to do that, to think more creatively about, hey, you're not going to end up in Silicon Valley, probably. So how can we sort of engage in a different way? Nobody's going to open this door for you. And they know that, right? If you just look at our curriculum, it's often disrupted by students who are protesting. They break down their own classrooms, like they really are glitching. So to try and redirect that energy from a creative place and a place of understanding that stop knocking on doors that are not going to open for you. That's the work we've been doing. And there's hundreds of students that are now engaging with Glitching the Future. And it's been really interesting to watch that process.
I think the students should close this particular conference. Why not? It's about their future.
Mm-hmm.
You invited your students to write a comment about the video that we started with, the manifesto video. which is on our YouTube channel. I checked this morning, 210 students had written a comment about that particular video. I'd like to, shall we just read a few? This is one, a student said, this video shows how pride grows from resilience as being real about who you are. It's about finding strength in your story, expressing yourself freely and not shrinking to fit in. And when you stand for your truth, it's quiet but powerful, and it gives others permission to share. Yeah, you should be proud.
I am.
Here's another one.
This really hit me. Oh. Some of them are probably just doing this to get marks. Not gonna. Just that.
That's glitching the education system.
This really hit me. Tech isn't neutral. It mirrors power and profit. I love glitching the future. To rebuild with care, community, and many voices. We're not just fixing the systems, we're reimagining them. This message matters. We deserve better tools.
Well, that comes from the heart. And I think this one really is the most powerful. This stunning video, well, another mark. This video serves as a powerful wake-up call. It proves that we can challenge tech monopolies simply by refusing to play their rules. And instead of just complaining about digital bias, the future uses open source tools and community networks to help us reclaim our agency and to shape our future. So an 18-year-old under your guidance, exposed to this particular project that we're now talking about in Amsterdam, it is moving to Groningen, and it's just growing and growing and growing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really empowering.
It's amazing. Yeah, and thank you to Zuid-Afrikahuis for hosting us. We obviously have some criticisms, but it's also very inspiring for me to go back to Durban and be like, hey guys, I just shared the work that we're doing. If I can do it, then so can you. I cannot tell you how inspiring it is for my students to just watch me do that and be like, whoa, this world is like, it's doable, you know? So I really appreciate this opportunity, and, you know, onwards and upwards.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, everyone.